what's happening with this crisis on the southern border. And I'm joined by a number of my colleagues from all around the country. And we started yesterday touring around with the Border Patrol agents, especially last night when you see the large numbers of people crossing illegally over the Rio Grande. And it was alarming just how quickly we saw large numbers of people coming across. There were over 100 people already being held in a processing center. And then as we were standing there less than an hour, you just would see groups of people coming across, one after another, knowing that because of what President Biden has done with his policy since taking office, President Biden sent the message around the world that America's border is open. And you see the drug cartels especially exploiting these major loopholes in America's southern border to make millions of dollars a day bringing people across illegally. What was most heartbreaking is seeing the young kids, so many young children that are being trafficked and brought across. Many of them sexually assaulted along the way. When they come here, they've already been separated from their families in most cases. And then today we went to the Donna Detention Facility. And this really underscores how egregious President Biden's policy is on these children. We went into a facility in the middle of a pandemic that is designed to hold no more than 250 people. Today there's more than 4,000 people. And then we looked in some of President Biden's holding cells that he's set up for these young kids. Most of these cells were designed for 33 people. They have over 400 in each of these cells. One of the first people we encountered was a young girl, maybe no more than 10 years old, who was crying. And we asked her, "Why are you crying?" And she said, "Because I don't want to be here. I'm a father." How could President Biden and Kamala Harris allow this to go on and not even come here and see it for themselves? It's a disgrace that they won't come and talk to girls like the girl we talked to this morning, crying because she doesn't want to be here, but because he wants to appease his far left base and tell the world that America's border is open and undermine our national security. These kids are pawns in his dangerous game. It's got to stop. It was created when President Biden got rid of things like the Remain in Mexico policy. He could put that back in place tomorrow and stop this surge of illegals coming over. Stop this boondoggle he's given to the drug cartels to not only make millions of dollars off the human trafficking, but they know what the loopholes do to our Border Patrol agents. 40% of America's Border Patrol agents at these high trafficked areas are not stopping the drugs from coming in, which is their mission and what they want to do. They have to be over at these holding facilities babysitting the children that have come over, and the drug dealers know it, which means there are porous areas of our border opened up for the drugs to come across. And the drug dealers know while the Border Patrol agents are taking care of the kids that are coming across illegally, they have free reign to bring in drugs illegally. President Biden, you know this is going on. You can stop it right now. We are calling on you to come down here, see this for yourself, and then reverse the failed policies you put in place that created this crisis at America's southern border. Now I want to bring in a leader on national security issues, but Congressman from Texas, Mike McCall.
No, thank you, Whip. Thank you, Whip Scalise, for leading this delegation. I want to thank my colleagues. Welcome to the great state of Texas. Unfortunately, this is not a great day for America. It's not a great day for the southern border. You know, as a federal prosecutor down here, I was chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, and now I'm the leader on the Foreign Affairs Committee. I've been down here many times before, and I've seen this movie before in 2014 and in 2019. But I have to tell you, what I saw today was the worst humanitarian crisis on the border I have ever seen in my professional career. To see these family units and children blindly walking down a path last night, crossing the river, going to a temporary detention center, not knowing where they were, these children, and then this morning to go to the Donna Detention Center. And as Steve mentioned, you know, little children. I saw a 5-year-old, she had no idea where, she was all by herself. Her parents weren't with her, her family were not with her. She was in tears. This is wrong. And I would call it a form of child abuse. And the sad thing is, it didn't have to happen. It didn't have to happen. This is a self-inflicted wound, a manufactured crisis brought on by President Biden by the stroke of a pen on the first day of office when he rescinded the migrant protection protocols that were working. They were working, and the Remain in Mexico policy was working. The asylum cooperation agreements with the Northern Triangle were working. That is why the numbers went so far down. So far down. And now we got the briefing from Border Patrol. They are spiking. We're going to see more migrant surge than I think I've ever seen. And the Secretary said in the last 20 years, I think it's going to be the worst we've ever seen. And the sad thing is they caused it. There's a direct cause and effect between these executive orders, including the wall, but especially the asylum agreements, which have caused this humanitarian crisis. He can stop it with the stroke of a pen. And I asked him to do that. And I asked for his border leader, the Vice President Kamala Harris, to come down to Texas, come down to the border and see this for yourself. You cannot hide this from the American people. You cannot hide it from the press. The American people need to know what's happening in their country. And the threat of drugs and trafficking. The only people celebrating today are the traffickers and the cartels. And the losers are the families that get extorted for $8,000, which is all they own in Central America, and these kids being, exploited. And I'll close with this. The Secretary of Homeland Security, I've never seen Border Patrol, by the way, more angry and more loss of morale. The morale is at an all-time low, and it's because of this president and his actions. Secretary of Homeland Security came right here to McAllen just yesterday, and he didn't even leave the plane hangar to visit the Donna detention facility. He took a couple of questions, and he left. That is not leadership. What we need now is real leadership, and we're going to take this message back to Washington, and we're going to get real change accomplished. So, Whip Scalise, thank you so much for inviting all of us, and I yield back.
Thank you.
My name is Richard Hudson. I'm a congressman from North Carolina. I call on President Biden and Vice President Harris to come down here. They need to come here and see what we've all seen these 2 days. I represent Fayetteville, North Carolina, a population of 210,000 people. 210,000 people that we know of crossed the border last month. 174 that were detained, and 38,000 they tell me that they could see but couldn't get to. The entire population of Fayetteville, North Carolina came across our border last month that we know of. This is a humanitarian crisis created by the president and his policies, and they need to come down here and see it for themselves. President Biden, you need to stop this crisis.
Yeah, I'm Steve Womack. I represent the 3rd District of Arkansas, Northwest Arkansas. And like my colleagues, my heart breaks. We've got a crisis of unprecedented proportions ongoing. One by one, members of Congress are coming down here to see for themselves, and yet the President and the Vice President, who he's put in charge of our border situation, hasn't taken the time to come down and put eyes on this situation. It's an unforced error. It's dangerous. It's expensive. And it's unnecessary. And like my colleagues, I implore the President of the United States and his Vice President to get down here, see for themselves, and stop the madness. It's terrible for our country. It's a hardship on innocent people, and we can do better, and we should.
I think it's mostly been covered, but thank you for all of you that are here today, and Whip, thank you for putting this together. The only thing I would add is a couple points that haven't been made. One is that we're on track to add over 1 million people this year into this country. Think of that. There's not very many cities in this country that are 1 million people. And then secondly, last night speaking to one of the families there that came from Honduras, 3 young kids, it took them 40 days to get here. Watching hundreds and hundreds of them come across, and then seeing them this morning unaccompanied, I think the president would like to hide this from the American people. Hopefully it's not going to be hidden for much longer. But thanks for being here and thanks for covering this.
Hi, my name's Steve Scalise. I'm from Ohio's 15th Congressional District around Columbus, Ohio. I'm a father of an 8-year-old and an 11-year-old, and it broke my heart to be in the Donna Detention Center today and see kids younger than my kids, unaccompanied, knowing that HHS isn't following the law and accepting those kids within 72 hours. This crisis was created by President Biden's executive actions. There's 3 things he could do to end this crisis today, and I hope he does. Reinstitute the migrant protection protocols, the so-called stay in Mexico policy, start building the wall again, and re-up the asylum agreements with the Northern Triangle countries. We met with the Border Patrol last night, the midnight shift. Over 1,000 folks crossed the border at McAllen last night with the shift that we met with about 70 Border Patrol officers. They are overwhelmed. They need our help. They need the president to fix this crisis that he created through his policies. As a father, again, this breaks my heart. I wanted to come see it with my own eyes. I appreciate Steve Scalise and my colleagues for being here and seeing it themselves. Now we need to put some pressure to get it fixed. Thanks.
I'm Bob Ladd. I represent Northwest West Central Ohio, and I was down here 3 years ago on another trip to see what was happening, and I'm telling you, there is no comparison of what I saw today than what we saw 3 years ago. This is a crisis that the president has brought on. We call on President Biden, the vice president, to come down here to see this, and you've heard it. You know, when we were at the center this morning at Donna, that when you have an area that's set up for 33 kids, and you have, you know, last week over 600 there were 450 in just one of these today. You know, this is not a problem. This is a crisis beyond proportions. And we've got to make sure that the American people know what's going on here. They're not, you know, the administration is not talking about this, and we need to. But one of the things that I think we really need to talk about too is also about this, you know, our men and women in the Border Patrol and what they're doing, and all of our agencies on the federal side that are trying to do everything they can. But also here in the state of Texas, to thank Texas for all that they're doing with the National Guard and the troopers that are out here. So, you know, this is something that's got to be resolved quickly, because again, you've heard these staggering numbers we're going to see in the future. But if we don't get this thing done, it's going to, if you think it's bad today, it's going to be even worse tomorrow. And I really thank the whip for having us here today. Thank you.
Hey, Rodney Davis from Illinois' 13th District. This is my first trip to the border here in Texas, and I got to agree with my colleagues. It's just heartbreaking what we saw. The hundreds of kids packed into what used to be called cages in the last administration. Now I don't know what feel-good term is being used by this administration, but there's nothing feel-good about what we've witnessed and what this country continues to witness, and what our brave men and women in Customs and Border Protection and the Texas state troopers, what they see and what they deal with every day needs to be commended. President Biden, I know you're a compassionate person. Come here and witness this for yourself. It's a lot more compassionate to make sure we have good policies and that we make people follow our laws in this country than it is to see the lack of compassion that now families have gone through, because they feel that it's their only way to get to the greatest country in the history of the world, the United States of America. We are that shining city, but we have to have laws that everyone has to follow. And what really frustrates me is that this administration likes to blame the last administration for this problem today. If there's one thing that you probably can't blame the Trump administration for, it's for not focusing on the border. The Trump administration did what was needed, stopped the surge, and let's make sure we put those policies back in place to do what's right for these families that broke our heart last night.
Morning, French Hill. I represent the 2nd District of Arkansas, serve on the House Financial Services Committee. I was here in April 2019 when there was a crisis, and President Trump took action to correct that crisis with the policies that you've heard this morning. At that time, we were following Jay Johnson's advice, as Homeland Security Secretary for President Obama, that 1,000 people interdicted a day was too many. And I was here in April of 2019 when 1,000 a day was considered a crisis. Today, they've had a peak of 3,500 people in the Rio Grande sector apprehended, with an average of 2,200 people apprehended. So let's stick with the word crisis. It was a crisis in 2014. It was a crisis in 2019. President Trump took actions to secure the border and have a more humane treatment of people trying to seek admission or safety in the U.S. What struck me today is the good work of the Department of Public Safety, the troopers of Texas, the governor and his National Guard, Governor Abbott in Texas, and our Border Patrol working together to keep this country safe, but their eye is off the mission. They're not stopping terrorists from coming into the United States. They're not stopping illegal criminals from coming into the United States because their mission is now turned into a humanitarian mission, something that they're not sworn to do. And so the Biden administration is failing these families and failing our neighboring countries and failing the citizens of the United States by their inability to maintain and manage this challenge. And what's the result? 55 pounds of fentanyl came into this sector in this fiscal year. How much more could we have caught or interdicted if we had people out on the front lines instead of in court, in hospital, or in the Donna detention facility? 55 pounds, enough to kill 4,400 Americans. Think of what's out there that we're not interdicting. So it's a drug crisis too. It's a money laundering and terrorism crisis, something we're concerned about on House Financial Services Committee. In February, CBP says, based on their estimates and based on these trafficking numbers, $14 million a day, almost $15 million a day are being earned by the cartel. $400 million in 1 month, the month of February. You don't think that's a terror finance problem on the border of the United States? So President Biden and the Vice President, this is out of control. It's a crisis. Your leadership is failing, and you need to take action to protect the American people. Yield back. Thanks.
Any word for those companies that were building the wall and they were just told to stop?
We'll get into questions in our last speakers. Nicole.
Thank you.
Maliotakis.
I'm Nicole Maliotakis. I represent New York's 11th District. I want to thank Minority Whip Scalise for inviting me to be a part of this trip. What the Biden administration does not want you to know is simply that they have handed over the borders of our country to the cartels and smugglers. Our Custom and Border Protection, our law enforcement, they do an amazing job. But they need to have the resources, they need to have the staffing, and they need to have the ability to not have their hands tied to actually take action and do the work that they need to do to protect our country. At the current pace of 150,000 to 170,000 individuals crossing illegally, we're talking about, by this summer, more than 1 million people crossing illegally through our southern border in the year 2020 so far, come this summer, which is more people than reside in President Biden's home state of Delaware. That is the amount of people we're talking about. Now, I'm the daughter of immigrants. My mother is a Cuban refugee. I have a lot of compassion for the individuals that I saw today. When my mother came to this country, there were rules in place, there was order. What I saw this trip was chaos, disorder, and I saw people, children, being exploited by bad people who are making billions of dollars, trafficking individuals, trafficking drugs, trafficking guns, and it's incredibly shocking to me that any country, that any leader would allow this to happen.
Thank you. We'll be happy to take questions now. Yes, sir.
What do you tell the companies that were building the wall and all of a sudden were told just stop?
Yeah, on day one when President Biden took office, he ordered a halt to construction of the wall. And again, the border wall was working, and these are contracts in place. So the taxpayers of America are still paying the companies who have these contracts to build the wall, but now taxpayers are paying for the wall not to be built. And these are abandoned work sites. Like I told you, a Border Patrol agent just recently was severely injured because he was apprehending somebody crossing illegally, and he went through the work site following this illegal crosser and ultimately ended up getting seriously injured, may not be able to work again. Again, what does Biden tell to people like that are experiencing this?
Congressman McCall, you mentioned that you had a briefing with Secretary Mayorkas. Could you the hangar, but didn't he tour Donna when he came a couple weeks ago?
Yeah, I questioned him during our hearing. He never answered my question about why did you rescind the migration protection protocols, the remain in Mexico, the asylum agreements, which were masterfully negotiated by the prior administration, which has created this problem now. I did not meet with him, but I will tell you that some of the top leadership at CBP were quite disappointed that he didn't visit the Donna detention facility while he was here. I think just giving having a Q&A with your just a couple of your employees in an airport hangar is not a sufficient trip, and it does not help the morale that I'm very worried about. I've worked with Border Patrol when I was a federal prosecutor, chairman of Homeland. I worry about their morale, particularly when it's been stated 40% of their efforts are taken away from the front lines to become babysitters and bus drivers. I think it's incumbent upon a leader to visit his troops, to go see compassionately what they have created and try to fix it. And he failed to do that.
A quick follow-up. How long did he meet with the whole group?
He did not meet with us.
Oh, he did not meet with
No, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you met with him before. This wasn't this trip.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, two questions here. Hunter Davis with Fox News. The first for Representative McCaw and the second for Representative Scalise, or whichever order. The first, the border wall and the construction that has stopped has left a lot of levees in jeopardy. One here in Mission, Texas, specifically maybe 3 miles from here, is currently down, and there's no border wall protecting this city like it was supposed to. Has that been a conversation as we approach hurricane season?
100%. So we saw the unfinished levee and wall. And, levees can provide infrastructure to protect the border as well, and they have a practical purpose for flood mitigation. What Border Patrol told us today was that they're very much in jeopardy of flooding now because it's not finished. It's put on pause. Congress's intent when we passed this legislation and appropriation was to finish the job. And President Biden, by executive orders, defying the will of Congress. And so it is a problem. The agents are very worried about hurricane season approaching, as you know. We in Texas in August, September, and October. And if it's not completed, it's going to pose a threat to the residents there. So I hope we can move forward, with this. But it is a danger to the residents here in Mission and in McAllen.
And then following up here with Representative Scalise, I don't know if it's clear to everybody, but it seems clear that as of now, there's going to be no movement on the current policies that are in place at the border. So what is Congress going to do? What are you guys going to do when you get back to Washington to help the situation here?
We're going to do everything in our power to first raise awareness about what's happening, because the Biden administration clearly doesn't want America to know. They're keeping the press out of these facilities for a reason. They're trying to hide this national scandal. We're going to also file legislation to reverse some of those executive actions President Biden took that every Border Patrol agent will tell you. It's not like the jury's out. It's not like you get 5 different suggestions. Every border agent who knows how to manage America's border tells you the exact same thing. It was the Biden executive orders reversing those Trump policies that led to this national disgrace, this influx of people across our border. So clearly continuing to call on President Biden to come see this for himself. Look, maybe he's so ashamed of it that he wanted to dump this off on Kamala Harris. She's so ashamed of it, she doesn't want to have anything to do with it, which is why she won't even come here herself. Imagine a vice president of the United States being placed in charge of a national crisis by the president, and weeks later she still hasn't come down to see what's going on so she can address it. That's a dereliction of duty. And so we call on the president and vice president to do their job. They can reverse this policy tomorrow. We'll continue to raise national awareness. We'll try to push legislation. Good luck trying to get Pelosi to address this scandal, because Speaker Pelosi doesn't want to address this problem either. But again, when you talk about what's happening in that Donna detention facility, for example, you've got right now in most states, you can't have more than 250 people in a facility. Restaurants are being told they can't have more than 25% capacity, and yet you've got the Donna detention facility right down the street that has a capacity of 250 people, that has over 4,000 in that facility today, in the middle of a global pandemic. Where's President Biden's concern about the science that he used to talk about when he was a candidate that now he has abandoned? He is letting they said about 10% of the people in that facility right now have COVID-19, and they're not 6 feet apart. They're not 3 feet apart. When we saw these cells that they're holding these kids in, designed for 33 people, and there's over 400 in them, they're inches apart, many without masks, transmitting COVID. They're super spreader events, and you don't see any concern by President Biden for that. These are the things that we're going to continue to expose and let people all across the country know what's going on. You see so many members of Congress from all around the nation. We're going to continue to spread this message, and it can all be stopped today. The ultimate goal would be to get President Biden to address this problem and fix it. He can do it. He created this problem with a stroke of a pen. He can fix this problem with the stroke of a pen.
Representative Scalise, how Congress reconcile the fact that, according to reports, HHS is spending $60 million a week to take care of the unaccompanied minors, and the administration right now is trying to propose a big infrastructure bill that it means a lot of money for taxpayers. And the second part, what do you think, what is your message to the Secretary of Homeland Security? He did not bring any journalists. It was not open for the media on any of these trips. It's important to have the transparency of more reporters having access to these facilities?
Yeah, we would like to see full transparency. And as you mentioned, the Secretary of Homeland Security came, as Congressman McCall said, stayed in the hangar the whole time. Didn't take questions from the press. He only talked to a few Border Patrol agents. And if he listened to them like we listened to them, they all are saying the same thing that can fix this problem, and he refuses to do it. But if you get back to the money, we're talking billions of dollars of cost to the American taxpayer by President Biden's crisis he's created. But before you go borrowing money from our kids and grandkids to do trillions in infrastructure, they're already spending money that's been appropriated to build this wall, and they're spending that money to not build the wall. How about you take the money that's already being spent and actually build wall, border security, infrastructure, flood protection. I'm from New Orleans. We know a thing or two about levees and flood protection, and they told us thousands of families in Mission, Texas are exposed to flooding today on the midst of hurricane season because President Biden stopped building their flood protection. And by the way, the administration promised they wouldn't leave them hanging during hurricane season, and he's left them holding the bag there. It's a national disgrace what's happening, all self-created by President Biden.
Do you think it should be repatriation? That the kids, I mean, in 2014 we had the same issue, and a lot of the kids were sent back to their countries. Their first ladies came, they visited with them. That should be a way to try to send them back, and that way it's not the burden on the taxpayer.
What the Border Patrol agents will tell you is that the word's gotten out all across, not just Central and South America. At Donna, there's over 50 countries represented in that detention facility. And we're talking about people on the terrorist watch list that they've now apprehended. 1,000 felons that were released from American prisons and deported back to their countries. 1,000 that have come over just this year. 100 pedophiles that were arrested in America, did time in America for pedophilia, that were then released, sent back home, and now they've come across. Those are just the ones we've caught. So again, this can all be stopped by President Biden reversing the action he took that created this crisis. Send the message back across the world that our border is going to be secured like every other country. But when the message today is that the border is open, they're coming in droves. Again, we were there less than an hour, and it was a constant parade of people coming across illegally because they know the loopholes in the system, and the drug dealers are the ones making the most money, and Americans are the ones paying the price. Thank y'all for coming. Thank my colleagues for coming out to see this.
Thanks, everybody.
Good job, Steve. Good job.
Call. You were completely liberal. I was shocked.
I know, it's stunning. Stunning. I spread myself.
Be in touch with you.
What time you out?
We saw last night that I never seen
Good, how are you?